Oh, good lord. Okay. Why do people create stories? Is it to entertain? Is it merely a human need to communicate, manifesting in the forms our ancestors felt most convenient and accessible? Or is it something more vague, like for the purpose of pure creation and creativity? Plato writes, at least in his opinion, quote, "Then shall we so easily let the children hear just any tales fashioned by just anyone, and take into their souls opinions for the most part opposite to those we'll suppose they must have when they are grown up?" As Zachary Durick recognizes in his 2019 thesis, Shaping Imaginations, Plato sees stories and the ideas in this storytelling within a growing society as paramount to how you shape the opinions and the Overton window of a future generation. It's true that the morals and ideals that are placed within all of the things that your children see and hear outside of the bleach safety bubble you wish to place them in are still forced down their throats every waking moment, every time they step out of your house, and even any time that they interact with anything within your house. The fact that you even have a house in the first place is an interaction with an ideal. Throughout all of these examples of why we tell stories, I neglected to list one of those. Storytelling's ability to comfort one in their misunderstanding, to comfort someone who is understandably confused in this chaotic life that we live, to comfort us in not only our path, but the importance and undeniability of our path. We are creatures of comfort. Survival is the instinct to fight for the comfort of continuing, of existing. And it is this search for comfort that can lead us to create stories. Miguel Joaquin Diego del Carmen Serrano Fernandez, born September 10th, 1917, in the dead center of Chile in its capital, Santiago. And while he was born into a wealthy family maternally, by the age of 8, both of his parents had died. I believe his mother died first when he was 5 years old, and then his dad died later on, 3 years later when he was 8. Being raised now by his grandma on his father's side, moving between a mansion and a condo in the city. He grew up to be very smart, studying at a high school in the city known as Internado Nacional Barros Arana. And it is because of this school's history that he noted that his affinity for Germany and its ideas started at this university. And you might ask yourself, why does a university in the capital city of Chile have heavy German Prussian influence? The short answer is colonialism. The long answer is that many of the cities in Chile were founded by Spanish settlers who had multiple German settlers and colonizers accompanying them, furthering the ability for the people of the German diaspora to easily move to Chile and work the land that they settled, leading to the very roots of the capital and many other cities in Chile to have a complicated, if not supportive, relationship with the country of Germany, its culture, and its people. German people have been immigrating to Chile since it was founded, since it was colonialized by the Spanish. It is because of these German roots that the country and its people have ended up being very supportive of the German diaspora, regardless of, let's say, their social standing within the world. There's a lot more that I could say about the colonization of the Southern Americas. It's a very complicated one that involves a lot of interconnected pieces, and Chile at one point was kind of just the entire bottom of South America. Fuck it, I guess. And there's actually a lot of stories that push me towards my anti-imperialist and pro-global immigration stances. It is the creation of borders that tears us apart, in my opinion. As Miguel Serrano was going to this high school, his friend and notable socialist, Hector Barreto, was shot and killed by the fascist Nacitas, a militant National Socialist group, Nazis, group within Chile. This death initially led Serrano down a path of pro-socialist and communist views, but the country's political instability fraught with coups, and authoritarianism common across South America at the time, made Serrano not only skeptical of socialist ideas, but later on being infatuated with the same group responsible for killing his friend. Only a few years later, in 1938, the infatuation took over him when he began writing the fascist Nacitas' journal, Trabajo, which then formed later on when the war started into writing his own pro-Nazi journal. And while a lot of fascist Chileans weren't explicitly anti-Semitic at the time, it wasn't until Serrano got his hands on this book called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is a very, you could say, famous Jewish global conspiracy, which, in my opinion, is a very good metaphor. The book itself is a very good metaphor for Miguel Serrano, not only in his ideas, but also in his life. The book itself is an amalgamation of plagiarizations that ended up being published into a single volume to create this global conspiracy, this global system. After finding this book and really liking its contents, he ended up copying excerpts of the book into his pro-Nazi journal that he was writing at the time. And it spread Jewish conspiracies across the fascist Chileans in South America. That is, of course, depending on how successful you believe his journal to be at this time. Now, as we move on to this next part, it is important to focus on the specific ideas that Serrano chooses to take as fact. But with all of this in mind, Serrano later claimed to have joined a yoga-practicing pro-Adolf Brahmin-descended group that practiced ceremonial magic and revered the Nazis. All of this definitely doesn't coincide with his, at the time, growing fascination with Western esotericism and Hinduism, and definitely has nothing to do with earlier esotericists and proto-Nazis to claim that they were either visited or initiated into an older, more secret society, thus giving their esoteric ideas more standing, just off of some arbitrary ancientness that they can attribute their ideas to. Now, it is within this supposed group that he names a leader named FK, and it is this FK that would basically lay down the groundwork for what would become a lot of Serrano's later, more insane ideas. Now, I say later, but it is because of this part and because of later activities that I hesitate to say that he developed these more insane ideas later on. I personally believe that he's been developing them his whole life. Some examples being like the idea that Hitler is a Hindu incarnation to help humanity with the Kali Yuga, and that there is some sort of outer realm in which Aryans can get to spiritually with their astral body. That's what they believe shifting is, or whatever. That's what they believe astral projection really is that you're going into the spiritual realm with the Aryan monad. Now, I said in the last part to focus on the specific ideas that Serrano claimed to have joined and begun practicing at this time, because it's important to note that Serrano's a big inspiration for a lot of his writings was Savitri Devi. Now, when we look at Savitri Devi, who I talked about in my last video, I kind of mentioned that she was a very antisocial woman. Most extreme, at least this extreme, far right intellectuals are very antisocial historically. And not just because of this, but it was definitely a factor in those ideas. She was very unpopular in India with her ideas about developing the German guy and adapting him into Hindu beliefs. Specifically, Vaishnavites were pretty disgusted at the idea that Hitler is a reincarnation of their god. Of course you're insulted by that. Who the fuck wouldn't be? But remember that when we get into these later ideas, that they are an amalgamation of many practices and earlier racist theories that are either directly appropriation of another's culture or is an idea that's created upon other misinterpreted myths to justify oppression of the groups you wish to steal from. It wishes to steal from minority and from indigenous groups, not only physically through their land, labor, and government, but in Devi's eyes and Serrano's eyes, also spiritually, seeking to transfigure and dismember this practice from its creators, thus showing us that the roots of these specifically white supremacist esoteric conspiracies are built upon cultural appropriation and separation. The right, the far right, has never had the ability to meaningfully create, only destroy, exploit, and steal. Later on in his life, Serrano had a pretty meaningful political career in Chile, being the ambassador to two countries for Chile, Bulgaria and Austria. And I don't want to get too deeply into his political career, mainly just because it would be a bunch of ways in which he had been friends with and helped former Nazis and met and had talks with a bunch of the most insane neo-Nazis at the time. This job in politics allowed him to travel a lot. And because he was traveling a lot, he had a lot of time to write. And write he did. He wrote a lot. He wrote a ton. And like I said, Serrano had a lot of friends who were very bad people. But one of these books, The Visits of the Queen of Sheba, had a foreword written by Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, and paramount to how we view the conscious and unconscious in the modern age. Carl Jung was friends with Miguel Serrano. I wanted to really highlight that. They were such good friends that Serrano wrote a whole book about it. He wrote a whole book about it. Yes, the book is also about him being friends with another dude, but I've never written a book about how good of friends I am with somebody. Personally, I've never done that. I'd write a book on this guy. Does that make me gay? Ooh. It's okay. I am. And even though Carl Jung would die a year after the book was published in 1960, this meant that he wouldn't be around for the publishing of Serrano's later, more insane writings. Oh my god, I'm insanely pissed. I just recorded for like a fucking hour and half of it's like gone. Jesus Christ. Let's fucking try this one more time. Okay, where was I? But even though Carl Jung died in 1961, I want to highlight the fact that Miguel Serrano had been developing a lot of these insane ideas throughout his entire life. he wrote a fascist, he wrote a Nazi journal in his youth. Carl Jung wasn't oblivious to Serrano's ideas, even though that's how a lot of writing would like to make it seem, so that Carl Jung can still be like the father of analytical psychology. But later on in the early 1970s, Serrano would begin to publish these more nuts writings. The 3 books specifically on Hitler that I referenced earlier, that lean more into the extreme, at least explicitly. Being an early Holocaust denier, an adopter of the Hindu faith, the early pagan faiths, and a contemporary understanding of the Gnostic faiths, as well as being a lover of pseudo-archaeology and early Nazi conspiracies, and being fans and friends with many notable ancient alien theorists. He developed this idea in which the Aryan race, white-skinned, blue-eyed, blonde-haired giants, came from space. Their origin is from space. Some say Venus, some other sources just say from the divine, whatever. But they came from space, and they settled here on Earth and created this spiritual hyper city in the North Pole called Hyperborea. And it is from there that these original Aryans were able to do what I said before, where they would astrally project into like the ether or whatever. And it is from there that these original Aryans were able to fend off the demiurge, and at least spiritually, and they were able to still maintain their connection with what is known as the divine monad. Now, the divine monad is an idea that comes from, again, Gnosticism, and it is Gnosticism's real God. In Gnosticism, the monad is a pure form of nothing but creation. It is creation. And it is within Serrano's belief that only the Aryan race has a full connection with the divine monad, because the earth and all of the people on it before the Aryans came to Earth were created by what is known as the demiurge. They are creatures of the demiurge. Now, the demiurge is usually associated with Yahweh, or what is known as the Abrahamic God, of Judaism, of Christianity, of Islam. God, Yahweh, is usually connected with what is known in Gnosticism as the demiurge. And it is thought that it is a being that is not necessarily evil, but imperfect and ignorant. And it is in this ignorance that he believes that he is perfect and believes that he is able to create a perfect world. But he did not do that in Gnosticism's eyes. And Serrano takes this up and uses it as a way of justifying exploitation and saying that anybody that he doesn't like is a creature of the demiurge, and that anybody he does like is of Aryan blood, right? But it is within Serrano's system that he says that when these Aryans came down and they lived in the spiritual city in the North Pole, known as Hyperborea, which I'm sure you've heard that before, that when these original Aryans started to, let's say, procreate with the creatures of the demiurge, one of these being within his system, lizard people. He believes, I'm pretty sure he says that specifically Jewish people are the lizard people. And then that's where like a lot of course the global government stuff comes from. And I know what you're thinking, that this sounds like early 2000s internet conspiracy stuff, but he was writing this in the 1970s. He was an old guy. He has believed this stuff since the 40s, since before the Nazis even started World War II. He has been thinking about this stuff. But when these original Aryans started to race mix, the original Aryans started to lose their connections with this divine monad. And because all of these original Aryans did the bad thing of race mixing, Hyperborea, the original Hyperborea, lost its power somehow. And because of this, everybody left in the city of Hyperborea. And because Hyperborea supposedly like lost its power or whatever, everybody who was left in the city supposedly went into the inner earth and into what is known as Agartha, which I'm sure you have also heard before. And there they supposedly found what is known as the Black Sun, which this is very famous imagery within a lot of neo-Nazi circles and even within actual literal Nazi circles. They believed that this black sun gave them more power and more sustenance than like food or the regular sun ever did, and they don't even have to come up to the surface world to ever get anything anymore. And it is from this inner earth that all of these original Aryans are still able to fight off the demiurge spiritually to this day. And he believed that these inner earth Aryans who created all of culture, according to him, they created every culture. Obviously, this wasn't just his idea. Savitri Devi believed this. Ariosophist believed this. Yeah, the idea that these Aryans created every culture is a popular one. He believed that these original Aryans reincarnated was Vishnu, who is also Wotan, also known as Odin, and that this Aryan Vishnu reincarnated on Earth as a baby into Hitler, into Hitler, and that Hitler was there to help humanity with the Kali Yuga. Now, in his original writings, he said that he was here to usher humanity out of the Kali Yuga, but then the guy like died, so like that was an issue. Because he died, that gave Nazi esotericists a lot of questions, a lot of well, fucking what now? And this is where Serrano and Devi differ. While Devi believed that Hitler did die as a sacrifice to humanity in a sort of Christ slash Hindu way for reincarnation later on, even though she was very anti-Judeo-Christian, she still like wanted to give this Christ-like image to Hitler. Serrano believed that Hitler had faked his death. Now, because Serrano was a big believer in the ancient aliens theory, the idea that aliens had, oh my god, bro, this dude drives me crazy. This dude drives me fucking nuts because it's like that's where a lot of this system comes from. Obviously, he believes in ancient aliens. He believes that aliens came down to Earth and were able to help. You know, like when you look on the History Channel and shit, and they want to spew the idea that like ancient Egyptians could have never actually built the pyramids and shit because of how complicated and how intricate that the cuts are and stuff, and that it's because of aliens is a Nazi idea. Like it comes from these esoteric Nazis, guys. Like we can't sit here and act like that the idea that actually it's alien technology that helped us build all of these amazing and somehow undefinable ancient creations is because of aliens. It is racist. People will call you a crazy liberal and a fucking sensitive snowflake for saying that shit like that is racist. It was created by an esoteric Nazi, guys. Like, we can't sit here and not act like these guys use these ideas to be racist, to exploit other people, to say that actually it's okay if we do genocide on groups of people because they're creatures of the demiurge. It is that separation of the soul from the human. It really pisses me off. It really pisses me off because people, I don't want people to not have fun, right, with their fucking conspiracies. But you have to look at this. You have to look at where it comes from. But where he differs is that he believes that Hitler faked his death, and he also believes in the early idea that Nazis had UFOs, that all these UFO sightings that were happening in the 40s and in the 30s and stuff, in the late 30s, were actually Nazi built UFOs, specifically built in the BMW factory. Nazi UFOs are BMWs, by the way. But he believes that Hitler faked his death, and him, along with a fleet of Nazi UFOs filled with his most trusted SS members, took these UFOs and they fled to the South Pole, to Antarctica, where they went through these secret passages and were able to get into Agartha. And it is in Agartha that Hitler, also known as Vishnu, also known as Odin, will reincarnate one more time and come back as another reincarnation of the god Vishnu, known as Kalki. And that in 430,000 years, while the SS members are down there spiritually fighting with the demiurge in their astral bodies, that's where they believe that astral projection comes from. These racist motherfuckers. That's what they believe astral projection is for. Would be fighting the demiurge, and that now in 430,000 years later, at the end of the Kali Yuga, they're going to be all spiritually trained, and then they're going to come back in this fleet of BMW Nazi UFOs, and Hitler's going to be Kalki, who, by the way, is blue. So Hitler will be blue, and he'll be giant, and he'll be Kalki. And he'll come back in this fleet of Nazi UFOs, and he will come and kill all of the race traders, all of the disabled people, every brown person, and anybody who isn't willing to drink the vril. Which, if you don't know what vril is, it's this mythical drink that will sap all of the demiurge's ickiness out of you, meaning, like, you know, the fact that you're from Somalia, or the fact that you're like Trinidadian. I don't know. It'll just take it right out of you, and you'll become an Aryan. So, like, the fact that Serrano was from Chile, not even gonna be an issue, buddy. Just drink that vril, just go ahead and suck it right down, and you can enter Agartha too. And you too can spiritually fight the demiurge in the inner earth against the lizard people on the surface. With the system in mind, though, it's easy to dissect these ideas. It is easy to see its amorphous pieces. Pieces that were brought together within their own historical contexts. Serrano existed only within his own historical context. When you read a lot of his writings, you can see these ideas developing throughout time. You can see how not only he reacts to real-time situations, but how his system changes with those real-time situations. It is how all religion morphs and changes over time. But to call this religious, to call this disgusting system a religion, would be an insult, because these ideas were not brought together out of compassion for the sources who originally wrote them, the indigenous people who originally wrote these ideas. And he didn't bring them together for an honest journey of deeper understanding of the truth that the sources speak of. He amalgamates these ideas to serve a system, to serve the system that not only allows him to live a comfortable and rich life through the exploitation of others, but also the system that allows him to sleep at night knowing that he's doing that. Comfort is the only thing Serrano hoped to provide himself with these writings. And considering the proliferation of these ideas and how its dismembered pieces float around the zeitgeist even to this day, with giants, hollow earth, lost civilizations, Nordic people being from Atlantis apparently, so Atlantis is a part of this, and globe-spanning governments, which historically is a anti-Semitic dog whistle. Serrano was an awful man that sought to give a system of hate to a group of hate. And it is this cultural dissection, destruction, and transfiguration that allows neo-Nazi conspiracies to continue to exist across countries and still drives active hate movements and racial violence to this day. You don't have to feel like an idiot for believing in a conspiracy, but you do have to respect and honestly seek to find the truth within your sources. If you are reluctant to ask questions, if you ever get lazy and stop discovering things, you will be left living in a system that will give you a life of mindless suffering, or at worst, drive you crazy and make you look for answers the way that Serrano does, by being a bigot. He does this through bigotry and through hatred. No one wants to be a bigot. Always respect your sources and always understand where ideas come from. Because a TikTok one day is a Christ church another. My name is Milk. I love you very much. Thank you very much for watching.
Milk. I'm on that milk pack. Milk. Till the cows come home. Milk. That's some deep shit if you think about it. Milk.